you very much. Thank you, Dean, for that introduction. I'm always honored to speak at Memorial Day and other military events. I really enjoy it, and I'm especially honored to be speaking at a Lutheran church. You know, I grew up in Belleville, North Dakota, where my dad was once mayor, but the two most powerful people in town, Pastor Nissen at Oak Valley Lutheran and Father Carl at St. Cecilia's Catholic Church. And I lived, if you drew a line between them, I lived right on that line, almost in the center. And I actually considered becoming a Lutheran pastor when I was a teenager. I really seriously thought about it. Now, Pastor Nissen, he was universally loved, and I think that's what kind of drew me to that occupation. And I was an avid reader and you know, listened attentively to all the readings. I was a very good kid in church. That's partly because during my early days, my mother always had a belt in her purse. And quite often, I would be dragged by my ear to the Sunday school area, and I would come back a much more behaved child. Now, in his text message to me, Dean said, "We encourage you to wear your uniform if you like." I just did something to my iPad here. See, technology. So, I would very much like to be in my dress blues. And one of my wife's favorite things is the grumpy period I go through each spring as I starve for a couple of months so that I can fit into the dress blues that were fitted for me in 1990. Well, this year, one, they're still packed up from our recent move, and two, I did not have that, I got injured and did not have that time to get ready to fit into those dress blues. Now, unfortunately, being Norwegian and Lutheran and North Dakotan, my grumpiness is barely discernible from my overjoy. So, but I promise you, if I'm invited back next year, I will fit in those blues. No matter how much my wife says, "Why don't you just buy a bigger set?" And you may have noticed that we came in a little bit late. That's because I blamed it on Kelly's driving. We were coming down the gravel road to get here, and she didn't like the road. She said, "I'm taking a detour," and we detoured to two worse gravel roads and ended up then on the same one. Now, the other thing that Kelly really loves is that the way that I write all of my speeches, including my Memorial Day speeches, in the hours and minutes before I give them. So I began this one at 5:20 this morning, and I finished it in the car. And even that is a lie because I was changing the font in the pew back then. But there's an advantage to my last-minute speech writing method, which was pointed out to me at an event in Minot. An older couple approached me and said that they had seen two of my Memorial Day speeches and thought they were the best ones they had ever heard. The woman said that they really liked how those speeches were about something. I asked, "Well, what'd you like best about them? And what were they about for you?" The husband replied, "What I liked best was that they were about 5 minutes." See, one cannot write a long, boring speech on the day of an event. Some would say that I have proven that it is entirely possible to write a short, boring speech in the minutes before it is delivered. Another advantage of writing a speech on the fly is that your themes naturally emerge in an unvarnished way. In the first Memorial Day speech that couple had heard, I began with the story of a phone call from my teenage daughter on a bright, cold day in January. My youngest, Francesca, was calling from Ford Island in the middle of Pearl Harbor and believed that her death was imminent. In the background, a civil defense warning said, "Ballistic missile inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill." That phone call was a gift, I said. When my daughter believed she was about to die, her first thought was to call her father. I went on to imagine what those who have been lost in service to our country might tell us if they could have a phone call with them. They might tell us to put away our phones and engage with our neighbors, I said. They might tell us to start talking to rather than shouting past one another. The following Memorial Day, I began with the story of Lieutenant Michael McGreevy, a Navy SEAL who had been one of my midshipmen when I was a company officer at the U.S. Naval Academy. He was killed in Afghanistan when the helicopter he was in was hit by an RPG. This happened during the rescue mission depicted in the movie Lone Survivor. Later in that speech, I talked about the story from 1 Kings chapter 19 of the prophet Elijah hiding in a mountain cave and waiting for God. There comes a strong wind that breaks the rocks, but God is not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but God is not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, an unquenchable fire, but God is not in the fire. And then there came a still, small voice, and Elijah came out of the cave. I encourage the audience to ignore strident voices that drive us apart, and instead listen for that still, small voice, the voice of our better angels. Now, looking at those two speeches, I realized that I did have a theme, and also that I could steal from them to develop this speech faster as we drove to the church. And that theme was an answer to a question a reporter had asked me at a Memorial Day service. How can we best honor those, and especially those of us who do not attend events like this, how can we best honor those who have given their lives for our country? The shorter answer is, we do that by making sure that the United States of America always remains a country worthy of their sacrifice. And that begins with being better citizens and better neighbors. And that begins with being merciful and knowing how much is enough. And it may sound strange to hear a Marine, a combat veteran, talking about the importance of being merciful, much less a politician. Another thing I have dabbled in, talking about being merciful when politics is definitely a combat arena these days. So, but Jesus, after he tells the story of the Good Samaritan to the expert in the law, Jesus asked the man, who then was this man's neighbor? And the expert replies, he who showed him mercy. And Jesus says, go then and do likewise. It's one of the few direct commands Jesus gives in the New Testament. And of course, in the Beatitudes, Jesus says that blessed are the merciful. I would argue that the first person we need to show mercy to is ourselves. Now, a couple of years ago, my wife thought that I had PTSD because I had this way of getting myself to do things. I developed this really angry drill sergeant who talked to me in a very demeaning way. And I was starting to do that out loud as I would be trying to get things done. So I actually went and saw a therapist, and we talked, and I described things. And she said, I don't know about PTSD, but I am pretty sure you have ADHD. And I'm like, well, everybody has that these days. You know, I've been a teacher, so like I kind of understood. But so I went and I got tested, and I was very, very much positive for ADHD inattentive. And I was once a regional airline pilot, but I swear that did not impact that job at all. But I came back, I finally got medicine, and I was in my office one day working. It was the first day I'd taken that medicine. And I'm filing things and putting things away and getting things done, and I'm like, I do not feel this stuff working. And then there came a point where the medicine wore off. And all of a sudden, I had all this anxiety, all this fear. I was seeing the mountain of things that were behind this little pile of paper. And I almost cried. I couldn't believe the difference. And I also saw how unmerciful I've been to myself for so long. You know, we are all our own worst critics. Some of us more so than others. And I actually need the medicine less just because I now know that it is not a character problem. I am not that thing that mean drill sergeant always said I was. It's just a little bit of brain chemistry, and I can overcome it. So 3 weeks ago, so that covers the merciful part, and now knowing enough is enough. 3 weeks ago, I attended a talk titled, How Much is Enough? By a guy named Kai He, who had been a very wealthy and top investment banker in New York City, but he was never home. And his first child was on the way, and at a very young age, he left that business and moved out to California, where he lives now. And it turns out that unless we define it ahead of time, what we have is never quite enough. When you poll a millionaire, someone who has $1 million, and you ask them how much would be enough, they say double. If you ask someone who has $10 million and you ask them how much would be enough, they say $20 million. It is almost always double what they currently have. Now, I can tell you from my time in Iraq that some of the best memories are built in the times of worst privation. And I can almost guarantee that those we've lost in service to country would tell you the same thing. When my daughter believed she was about to die, she discovered that a conversation with her father was enough. It was more important than the fancy iPhone she used to have that conversation. She coveted nothing else. So, let's all go be better citizens, better neighbors, knowing that we are enough. God bless all of those who've lost their lives in service to country and all who have served. God bless us all, and God bless the United States of America.